Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Real Estate Roundtable presented by Angie Goulet & Associates. We are a real estate team located in the Windsor-Essex County area with RE/MAX Preferred Realty. In this week's episode, we'll be discussing accessory dwelling units, such as tiny homes. My name is Steve Blaze, Team General Manager, and I'd like to welcome our newest realtor to the team, Katya Augustin. Welcome, Katya. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Steve. I'm happy to be here.
Great. Well, before we get into the accessory dwelling units, I'm so excited to be working with you on the team. Would you mind giving everyone a quick idea of your background?
For sure. I'm going to be a bit more personal here because I feel it's more intimate since we're live. But first of all, I'm a mother. I have a beautiful 14-year-old son, Emmanuel. I'm also a sister. I have an older sister, a younger brother, but my family's basically in Montreal because I was born and raised in Montreal. I'm the only one who ventured out, who's this way. And I've been in Windsor for more than 20 years. I'm also obsessed by real estate, whether it's in my personal life or in my professional life. Obviously, I'm a realtor, but I've owned properties for a number of years, and I just think it's the best investment you can make. Of course, we all need a home to live, but also I like to think of real estate as an investment, for your future, my future, for my son's future. And I think, it's a really great way to look at real estate in that respect. My work as a real estate came as a second career. I used to be a reporter for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. So as a young reporter, they sent me everywhere, right? They sent me to Winnipeg was my first job. And then Ottawa, then I ended up in Windsor, Quebec City, Toronto, Montreal. And then I came back to Windsor. Windsor kept bringing me back because it's such a great community. But after a number of years of doing that, journalism had changed, so I wanted it changed. It didn't really reflect who I was anymore. So I decided to go into real estate, which I had been doing, if you will, informally for 17 years or 20 years. So I decided to do my course, and here I am with the Angie Goulet team. I'm really happy to be here. And I think my number one value, or my number one focus as a realtor, is to make this a positive experience. I think it's such a stressful experience. The world is full of negativity. I want my interactions with people, whether it's clients or whether in my personal life as well, I want my experience with people, my interactions with people to be a positive one, and with all that it entails, right? So that's my focus as a realtor.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And I'm so happy to have you on the team. Looking forward to working with you for sure. And you're certainly very knowledgeable about income properties and the topic we're going to discuss today, which is accessory dwelling units. So, to get into this, as we all know by now, the housing market in many Ontario municipalities has increased significantly, and especially in areas such as Windsor, which are absolutely red hot right now, with super low interest rates and inventory shortages that are causing bidding wars that are running 1 to 2 to even 300,000 over the asking price. In fact, there was a listing today that just reported sold with a sale price of over 600,000 over the asking price today. So that's a pretty
crazy
big one. That's not the norm, but certainly it is challenging for a lot of people. So many economists believe that changes to things like financing qualifications or government taxation measures, these can help cool overheated markets. But others believe that these measures are really just Band-Aids that are really covering up a basic underlying problem, which is lack of housing.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So, any of you that are looking at building a new home right now, that finding developments that aren't sold out, finding lots, builders and developers are scrambling, trying to find buildable land to meet the increased demand that we have for new construction. So, how do we address this problem other than by continuing to create urban sprawl and grow it into our farmland? And the answer that a lot of people see is a better way is higher density living. And, how do we accomplish this? So enter the tiny home. And it's the proper term being like an accessory or an additional dwelling unit. We call them ADUs. Municipalities also call them secondary dwelling units, but that may be the answer for a lot of people. Katya, do you want to describe what an ADU is?
Yes, if we could get the second slide, Steve, while I'm talking about this, that'd be great. Because you'll see the definition, but of course, everyone can read. But I'll just bring your attention to certain points here that basically defines what an accessory dwelling unit is, or an additional dwelling unit. So if you could go to the second slide, please, that'd be great.
You got it. There we are.
So I'm not going to read the slide. Everybody can read, but I just want to bring your attention to some points that I've highlighted here. Attached or detached. So that means that it can actually be in your home. So, you can make another unit, an ADU in your basement or your attic. So it is attached, right? Or you can actually attach it. It can be outside of your home, but directly attached to the home, right? To the principal residence. It can also be detached totally, right? I'm thinking of building an ADU in my backyard. So basically it will be away from my principal residence. So that would be considered as detached. Accessory, very important term, because accessory meaning that it can't be higher than your main resident. It can't be larger than your main residence. It's just an accessory, right? So I really want to drive that point, because you can't build a second home basically on your property and call it an ADU.
Right.
On the same parcel, very important, because you will never be able to sever the property and sell both of these separately, right? Like your main residence and the ADU. So it's very important to understand that this is the same parcel, same address, right? Not independent in that respect. Permanent, very important too. You can't rent it as an Airbnb. That's not what it's meant for. It's really meant for somebody to live there permanently, 365 days of the year, like minus the vacations, but it's not meant to be a short-term rental. That's what it means, right? And independent in the sense that you need to have sleeping accommodations, of course, eating accommodations, cooking accommodations, sanitation. So basically the person living in there will not come into your house to take a shower, for example, right? Will not come into your house to cook their meals. Everything has to be done in that ADU, so it needs to be independent. So that's very, very important to understand, that it's not a second home, it's just a smaller accessory home, right? So if we go to this third slide, I think you'll get a visual of what that means, right? Like how it can look. So of course, on the first picture, if we go clockwise, let's take the first picture where you see, I'll take the picture on the far right here. I'm hoping that the right and the left are the same here, but you have an ADU which is attached, which is inside the attic, right? You can do it in the attic. And then down below, you have the ADU that I'm thinking of doing in my backyard, which is away from the house, detached, right? And then if you go to the right of that picture, then you see it's outside, but it's attached to the home. And then if you go up, then you see that the ADU is in the basement. What's very important to understand with all of these setups, right? There are different rules in terms of, for the basement, for example, you cannot build an ADU in a basement if you're in a floodplain, right? It will not happen. You cannot build an ADU at all if you have a multi-family residence. It needs to be a single family residence. It can be a townhome as well, and it could be a semi, right? That's fine.
If you've got a duplex now, you're not going to put an ADU in the basement on top of that and create a triplex.
Exactly. Okay. What needs to happen, because I have a duplex and I inquired to the city and they said what needs to happen is you convert your duplex into a single family residence and then you can build an ADU. Right? So very important to consider in terms of if you're thinking, oh, I like the setup with the ADU in the basement. Where if you're in Riverside, for example, if we're talking in Windsor, most of Riverside is in a floodplain. The chances of you getting an approval from the city to get an ADU in the basement are very slim, right? So these are things that you have to think about when you're thinking about what kind of setup you'd like for your ADU.
Okay. Next slide.
Sure. So again, as I said, single detached is okay. A semi-detached home is okay. A townhome, a row house is fine, right? You can have ADUs attached to these types of properties because, of course, you know, we want to bring people back to the core areas of town with these ADUs, but we don't want to create a problem, right? Where there isn't enough space for people to live in comfortably. So again, very important things to consider. The type of home that you have, not everybody will get an approval from the city to build an ADU. And what's important to remember as well is that you have to go through the same steps as you would if you were to build a home, in the sense that you need a building permit from the city and you need to get plans drawn up by either an architect or a designer that has a building code identification number. So it's not, oh, I'm going to do it myself on my, on in my leisure time. You really need to have those plans drafted by these professionals and have the plans approved by the city, whichever city or town you live in, the building and planning department, right?
Now that's a good point. You bring that up with the different towns. Right now, not everyone, not every municipality is on board with accessory dwelling units, right?
You're right. So far, Amherstburg is on board, right? You can build an ADU in Amherstburg and you can build an ADU in Windsor. But very good news, the town of Essex, the council of the town of Essex is actually evaluating a proposal to authorize ADUs in the municipality. And basically on Monday, next Monday, I think, it will go before council again for further discussion. So there's, it's optimistic. It's looking optimistic for ADUs in Essex. But so far, Amherstburg and Windsor. And the important story here, Steve, a very interesting story is that ADUs, the ideas of ADUs in Windsor, Essex, actually started in Amherstburg, where a group of students, a group of grade school students, brought that idea to council, and that's how it all started, right? They were advocating for, looking out for the environment, because these ADUs, being smaller, have a smaller carbon footprint, right? So they brought that idea to council, and that's how it came to light here in our area, although it had been in place for quite a number of years in big cities like Toronto and Vancouver, for example.
And I think Hamilton and Kingston and areas like that had accessory dwelling units as well for a little while. So it's nice to see us coming on board with that. I think it's an important part of dealing with a lot of things, but mostly our market right now.
Exactly.
So why would we build them?
Well, there are benefits all around. Of course, we'll talk about the challenges later, because nothing is ever perfect, especially not in real estate, right? But the benefits for an owner, right? Like, of course, passive income. You can build this ADU and there's nothing preventing you in any bylaw or anything. And that's what they actually want. They want you to rent it out, right? So passive income coming to you. But even if you don't, are not into becoming a landlord, and just the idea of becoming a landlord makes you squirm, it's a good idea if you have elderly parents, for example. They're still independent, they can still live on their own, but they still need a bit of a distance, so they'll be close to you, right? Elderly parents. And the one, your favorite, Steve, older kids coming back home, right? You're an empty nester, but all of a sudden your adult kids are coming back, and you don't really necessarily, you love them, but you don't want them to be right there with you, right? So they can actually be in the ADU. And also, if you have young adults who are looking to buy in this market, it's going to be super difficult, right? So until maybe they get their money together for a down payment, they can live in that ADU. So benefits for the owner for sure. Benefit for the occupants as well, right? They get an amazing, right? An amazing house, basically, right? Instead of being cramped in a one-room studio, or in an apartment that's outdated, they get like a top-of-the-line home that they can live in, right? I've been in one of those tiny homes, and there is no, you don't feel like you're in a tiny home. It's very, there's a lot of space, a lot of light, and it's just top of the line, right? Beautiful. For the community at large, of course, there are benefits because a lot of those older core areas of town had been forgotten, right, by younger people, right? So you breathe more life into those neighborhoods by bringing those young people back, right? And by bringing not just young people, but maybe older people who had gone, to Tecumseh, for example, in Windsor, in suburbia, right? They come back to the core of those cities, and there's new life in those neighborhoods. So for the community at large, it's also very, very beneficial.
And we can slow some urban sprawl a little bit too, right? Save our farmland a little bit, and
yes,
and keep it in the city. So no, absolutely, that's great.
Right. Benefits. I alluded to the fact that it's not all rosy, right? Before we get to the resources, I alluded to the fact that it's not perfect. So, of course, with ADUs, there are challenges. Parking being one of them, right? In some of those core areas, you don't have those, parking spaces available, or parking is at a premium. So by adding those ADUs in some of those municipalities, and I'll speak for Windsor because that's the municipality, the city I know most about in terms of ADUs. You used to have to be able to provide one parking space at least per ADU, right? But the city has seen that maybe this is too strict, too stringent, so they decided to be a bit more lenient. And in areas where public transit is easily accessible, they've done away with that one parking space rule. So that makes it easier for people, right? Because sometimes in those core areas, parking is at a premium, and I can speak about this firsthand. So that is a challenge. Also, the challenge is building, right? Building those tiny homes because of the stress that it puts on the municipal sewers, on stormwater system, because you need to use the same system you use for your house, right?
You're going to connect to that, right? Yeah.
To connect to that. So of course it brings on a bigger demand, right, on those systems. But luckily, in most cities right now, we're updating our infrastructure that way. So, but of course, it puts a stress on the system. So these are some of and the building, what I wanted to get at, and that's anecdotal more than anything, but when I went to visit one of those tiny homes, I was told that sometimes, just to give you an example, to install certain appliances, it's an issue, right? Because it's tiny. It's smaller than your average home, right? So, for example, if you're installing a washer and dryer and you're putting them in the closet, it's going to be tough because you're going to, like the people that I was speaking to, they had to go over in the closet and install everything, and it was very cramped in there. So it can present a bit of challenges that way as well, right?
Right. Well, it makes sense. Makes sense. Absolutely. All right. Should we advance?
Well, before we advance, maybe I wanted to talk to you about, because some people think, well, I can't do it. I don't have enough space, right, in my backyard. And I just want to dispel that myth a little bit, because you don't need a whole lot of space. Basically, these homes, and every municipality is different, but just to give you an idea of scale here, in the city of Windsor, it has to be your accessory dwelling unit, or what we call ADU for short, has to be 430 square feet, a minimum of 430 square feet. So basically, just to give you a visual, it's about 10 times your garden shed, right? We all have a garden shed in our backyard. So if you multiply this by 10, it's about, the size of a garden shed. And then it could be a maximum of 1,076 about square feet, right? So you don't need a whole lot of space to have that in your backyard, right? For example, or attached.
I think they went down. In fact, I think Amherstburg is at 322 for the minimum size for the tiny.
Very possible.
Even
very
smaller,
possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't need a whole lot of space. And also, people might think, well, I don't have an alley. Can I still have a tiny home? You don't need alleys to have ADUs or tiny homes on your property, just as long as you have access to the street, right?
Right.
you're fine. And also in terms of setback, people are thinking, well, I need, a big property. So it's kind of, I have a huge setback either from the street, from the alley, from my house. But no, you only need 3 feet of setback from the rear, from the property, from the ADU to the rear and the property sidelines, right? Only 3 feet, and only 8 feet to separate the ADU from your main residence. So that's not a whole lot, right?
No, you can
So
fit
it's
them on
very,
smaller lots. That's
yeah,
great.
very doable, very doable. Yeah.
Now, a question for you about, I mean, this is one of the first things I thought of thinking of tiny homes was, I mean, what do they sit on? Like, can you bring them in on a trailer? Can you just put them on blocks like a shed? I mean, I think if we're connecting them to sewers and power and all this other thing, it's probably not going to fly.
Exactly. It is not going to fly to have it on wheels or a trailer. You really need to have either a cement you either need to actually have foundations, real foundations, or a cement slab, right? It has to kind of, and it refers to the definition that I showed you in the beginning, permanent, right?
Right.
The idea here is that structure will be permanent. So you need to have it be permanent from the bottom up, right? So foundations or a cement slab.
Right. Okay. Now, looking at cost, I mean, that's got to be the biggest factor for people is it worth doing? So when we look at, for example, if I want to go out and buy an investment property today, a 2-bedroom investment property that I'm going to buy with a lot, right? A typical resale home. Hopefully that doesn't need too much work. How much am I going to pay for that, say in the city core? In comparison with, now I already own the lot. We can have this tiny home built on here. But is it cost effective? Am I better off buying, another home or building?
Well, if we look at prices, right, nowadays, and I mean, you can speak to that as well, Steve. The average price of a home in Windsor, $531,000, right? So, of course, I'm not talking about, I can't be specific here in terms of, if it's 2 bedrooms and that sort of thing. But I mean, the average, right? Average $531,000, whereas if you build this ADU, you can get away with it with $175,000, right?
Right.
So it really depends on your purse, I guess, what you have to spend. But I think it's a winning proposition because in the long run, it's going to increase the value of your property, right? And at a cost that is, I guess more affordable. It's not cheap by any means, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's more affordable than $531,000 for sure, right?
That's certainly true. And it's brand new, right? I mean, it's
exactly.
It's beautiful. It's modern. It's ready to go. And as some of the units that have already been built, they've had open houses. They put them up for rent, and the amount of people looking at them was just unbelievable.
Exactly. And I think you have pictures, right, of some of these.
Do you want to go through the rest of your slides, or should I switch over to the photos?
Oh, you can switch over to the photos right away, because the rest of my slides are about resources, where you go to find more information, right?
Gotcha. Okay. So in that case, we will, we'll just switch over to this other screen. Bear with me for a quick moment here. And I'll share that. Excellent. So this is the development that happened over at 773 Assumption in Windsor by NC Capital.
Right. And for people who don't know, maybe Assumption is in a part of town. It is the Wyandotte, I guess, district, like business district. So it's this one is actually very close to the river, to the Detroit River, in between. I'm sorry?
I said I've got some other photos as well, which are a little bit bigger, a little bit easier to see.
So in between Riverside Drive and Glengarry, let's just put it that way, and then maybe Peary and Wyandotte. So this one was right in that spot, right? So it's a spot where, younger people, or, people who have left the city would not necessarily come back to, right? So, so this ADU is just beautiful, like a contemporary design, right? From the outside, you can see very nice backyard. So it's not just the space inside, but the space outside was really, there was a lot of thought that went into it, right?
It's not that big, right? I mean, it's not an enormous lot. It's
no,
for the most part, a typical core town
backyard.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, you were inside this one, right?
Yes, I did go to the open house because, of course, I was curious because I want to build one, so, or two or three if possible. Exactly. So I was curious, and I told, like, as I told you before, and I think I'm repeating myself, but it's just amazing the feeling that you get when you go into one of those. You have no sense of being in a tiny home, right, in a smaller square footage, because as you can see, there are tons of windows, so a lot of light, very spacious, the way the layout was. And of course, you can see top of the line, kitchen here. So you had no sense of being in a cramped space at all. And this one was a 2-bedroom.
I mean, I look at this and I don't see a tiny home here from the inside
exactly.
in these photos right now. So
right. So and of course, this was meant to be a rental. Again, very important thing to know, and I think I mentioned it before. You can never sell it independently, right? It's not, you can't sever the land and sell the ADU and then sell the main residence. They come in one package, basically. So that's really important to know. But as you can see, it's just beautiful. Absolutely. And from the inside and out, right? So.
And I think we have, these folks have done a great job of they did a step-by-step post and images of the construction process, which was you can follow it all from start to finish.
Mm-hmm. And apparently this was the first tiny home in Windsor, the first ADU to be built in Windsor. Now, don't quote me on that. I have not verified this data, but apparently this was the first one built in Windsor. So
I mean, so far, I'm seeing a typical home construction process here, right? I mean,
exactly. Yeah. So same challenge. Yes, I mean, in terms of the process, you still have to go through the city, right? You still have to get your proofs approved by the city and whatnot. But the finished product is just, I think, it's just beautiful, right? And very beneficial all around.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And this company, that's really interesting too, for people who think, well, I can't do this on my own. I don't know where to start. Like, I don't want to do any publicity. I'm not paid by anybody. Disclosure here, I'm not paid by anybody. But companies like this, and there's another company in Windsor, Laneway Homes, they can assist you, right? If you want to build a tiny home like this and you don't know where to start and you're overwhelmed by everything that comes into building, you can hire these companies and they'll guide you from start to finish. So there's a way to do it even if you're not well versed in real estate, right? So it's accessible to everyone, really.
Right. Now, John Lee asks us today here what the cost to build this one was. Now, this was built in November of 2020. Do you remember, Katya, what they were building this for?
Well, I seem to remember that they told me that it was between $175,000 to $200,000. I do know that the other one, that the second ADU that was built in Windsor by Laneway Homes, had a lower cost, a much lower cost. But again, the design was not the same.
This is Laneway, right?
Yes, exactly. Laneway was less than the one that NC Capital that you just saw, right? And
Still a beautiful home.
Yes, and I think the goal here for Sarah Sipkar, who is one of the principals at Laneway Homes, was to build it under $100,000. Now, I don't know if she achieved her goal, which seems like a pretty lofty goal, but it just looks amazing. It looks beautiful, right? And they're rented out, like for people who think, well, am I going to put them up and they're going to stay vacant because nobody wants to be in them? They're rented out. right? It didn't take
Absolutely.
long.
I mean, I'm assuming since these were built, just based on where construction costs have gone, right, with materials, the
Mm,
lumber and drywall and trade costs and so on, I can expect they've gone up in price like everything else right now. But still,
very good point.
certainly much cheaper than trying to find a property that needs work for 300,000 or more, that you're going to have to sink another 50 to 100 in, and then you've got this done and it's brand new and it looks sharp.
Exactly. And again, I want to stress that if you're not into being a landlord, this might be for you anyway, right?
Yeah.
Because you might have elderly parents, you might have kids who are coming back to the nest, right? So I think we have to look at it as it can accommodate many needs here, right? So
So
not just, the passive income, um, you know,
segment. Yeah.
idea. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's fantastic. Well, thank you. Katja, do you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with everyone before that we?
Well, two closing thoughts before I get to my slides about resources, if we could. One, from an investor's perspective, I think it's a very, very good idea. And there's this quote that keeps running through my mind every time I speak about ADUs, because I'm obviously very interested and very passionate about ADUs, construction, homes, and whatnot. But I'm part of this group called the Real Estate Investment Network.
Mhm.
And I was discussing this idea with, a bunch of investors, because when people think about investing, they're thinking, oh, I'm going to buy another home, right? I'm going to buy a condo. I'm going to, do something of that nature. But this is more creative, and this is maybe more scary because it's on your property, right? You might live there and you might have these people or whoever live right there. But if you think at that person I was speaking to is, I think it's a winning proposition for homeowners, because basically he said it's having an ATM in your house, right? That's how he coined it, right?
Yeah.
Because you have that income, but it's in your house. So you don't have to go, to another city to invest. You don't have to go to another property. It's in your house. The ATM is in your house. So I thought that was an interesting quote, right? That kind of stuck with me. So
Absolutely. And I was asking which municipalities in Essex allow ADUs, and as we discussed, that is Windsor and Amherstburg at the moment. And Essex is considering that, and they're working on that, with hopefully more discussion on that on April 19th, I think.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think a lot more municipalities are going to follow suit, right?
Right.
Because I mean, of course, nothing is ever perfect, but I think this is a winning proposition, right? Like there are more pros than cons here.
So true, so true. So you have some resources for us.
Yes, very, very interesting
Switch over
resources.
to
Very
that
good
screen.
resources.
Oh,
Mhm.
sorry. Let me
Yes. Oh,
switch
you
over
did.
to us here.
Yeah. Oops.
There we
Great.
go.
Perfect. So number one, I can't stress it enough, go to the city or your town first, right? The city of Windsor put up a really nice video about ADUs, right? And it'll give you the basics. If you want to, just get a bit better versed about ADUs, that video I think will give you the basics. But then please go to your city or your town to find out about the regulate. Well, first of all, if they allow it, right? If you're in a city we didn't name, please go to your city and find out before you embark on the whole process, right? And then the building department, most of the time they have a person who is specialized, who is dedicated, who knows about ADUs that can guide you, right? So I can't stress it enough. Number one, resources is your city or town. Number two, I found this really great guide produced by the Ontario government about adding a second unit to an existing house. Because what you have to know is the rules are different, because more and more people are actually building new homes with ADUs already in them, right? So the rules are different that way. So if you have an existing home, though, and you're thinking of putting an ADU in it, there's this guide, right? And you showed the picture, Steve, if you don't mind going to the next slide. So this is what you'll see if you go on the link to the Ontario Guide to adding a second unit in your house. So you just basically, if you can't remember the link, if you don't see it, just Google adding a second unit in your home. Ontario government, and you'll get to that page.
And I'll
it's
put this link in the description. Once
good,
we finish
perfect.
up, we'll edit that.
Good. And it's so comprehensive. It gives you all the information that you need to know to start. So I would really strongly encourage you to go and see that guide. And lastly, for those who are on Instagram, I found this great Instagram account called Sweet _additions. And they actually have a lot of videos on there too. A lot of posts where they give you tips, advice, and whatnot on building accessory dwelling units. Again, you have to be careful with that. There's a caveat because I think they are based in Ontario, but all the rules are different. The bylaws are different, right? Depending on the city. So again, I will advise you to take the advice here, but then to verify with your city or your town. But it's a great resources if you want to get ideas, advice, tips on adding an ADU, because of course you'll hear granny suites, right? You'll hear accessory dwelling unit. You'll hear additional dwelling unit. You'll hear so many terms interchangeably to refer to what we're talking about. So it's very important that you check with your municipality, again, with your town, with your city, to see what the bylaws are regarding the ADUs. But again, these are resources that you can find, but you can reach out to us if you want to delve into this a little bit more, and I'll be happy to assist you with that.
Perfect. And I'm so glad that we're now, we have a legal avenue with which to do these things. People have been doing illegal basement suites for a really long time, right? As realtors, we see them all the time, and sometimes the living conditions are just, we wouldn't want to see people in some of these places. But it's great that we can see these options where we can build such nice units, and we can do it legally. Looking forward to
safely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not. I mean, it's something I'd be happy to live in, right? It's
for sure.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Definitely.
Wonderful. Any last comment before we shut her down today?
Well, maybe one more. I could speak for hours on this topic.
Well, you can see that you're passionate about it. That's great.
But just one more, though. One thing that I would advise people to do is to choose your architect or designer really carefully, because not all of them have experience building ADUs, and the bylaws are very different in terms of what you need to have in terms of ceiling heights or whatnot. So it's really important that you choose the professional that will guide you through the designing of that suite really carefully. In the city, you will find architects and architectural technologists or designers with that BCIN designation that I was telling you about earlier, that building code identification number, who have specific experience with accessory dwelling units. And that's very, very important, because it's not the same. It's not the same. Yes, it's the same building process because you're building something, but again, the rules, the regulations, bylaws, everything, it's a bit different, right? So you want somebody who has experience in that, right?
Very good tip. Very good tip, Katya. Thank you so much for coming on today, sharing all this information. It's exciting. I'm really happy to see this sort of thing happening. So join us next week on Thursday as we discuss real estate fact or fiction. So we're just going to go over some common ideas about real estate and maybe clear some things up about the market, about things that just relevant to real estate in general. So if you have any specific questions that you'd like, drop us a note on Facebook. We will put a poll up on Facebook as well to try and generate some questions that we can answer for you next Thursday at noon. So thanks again, Katya. I appreciate it very much.
You're welcome anytime.
Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.